Commander Park Jin-woo rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the strange symbols dancing across his computer screen. The Seoul Deep Space Communications Center hummed quietly around him, filled with the soft glow of dozens of monitors tracking signals from across the galaxy. It was 3 in the morning and most of his colleagues had gone home hours ago. The encrypted message had arrived 2 days earlier, buried in a stream of routine galactic communications. At first glance, it looked like random noise, but something about the pattern caught Jin-woo's attention. The frequency shifts were too regular, too deliberate to be natural interference. "Computer, run decryption protocol 7 again," he muttered, taking another sip of his cold coffee. The quantum processors worked tirelessly, their cooling systems whirring as they processed billions of calculations per second. Jin-woo had been a communications officer for 8 years, ever since Earth made first contact with the galactic community. He had seen plenty of routine messages, trade requests, diplomatic notices, scientific data exchanges. But this one felt different. Dr. Lee So-young looked up from her workstation across the room. The xenobiologist had been staying late too, analyzing genetic samples from 3 different alien species. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her lab coat was stained with various chemical solutions. "Jin-woo, you look like you haven't slept in days," she said, stretching her arms above her head. "What's got you so focused on that transmission?" "I think we're about to receive something important," he replied, watching as new lines of translated text appeared on his screen. The computer was finally breaking through the alien encryption, revealing words and languages he had never seen before. The translation software worked slowly, cross-referencing the alien syntax with known galactic languages. Jin-woo felt his heart rate increase as the meaning became clear. This wasn't a routine message at all. "Dr. Lee So-young, you need to see this," he called out, his voice tight with urgency. So-young rolled her chair over to his workstation, her eyes widening as she read the translated text. The message came from a species calling themselves the Zealothi, inhabitants of a world called Zelios Prime. Their words painted a picture of absolute desperation. "A synthetic plague," So-young whispered, her scientific mind immediately grasping the implications. "They're saying it's destroyed 80% of their population in just 4 months. The Zealothi transmission described their civilization in heartbreaking detail. They were an ancient people, masters of energy manipulation and quantum computing technology. Their cities floated above crystal lakes, powered by fusion reactors that could run for thousands of years. Their art, music, and literature had influenced dozens of other species across their sector of the galaxy. But all of that meant nothing against the biological weapon that was killing them." Captain Velnara, the Zealothi officer who had sent the message, explained how their ancient enemies, the Korthak Empire, had unleashed the plague during what was supposed to be a peace negotiation. The virus was unlike anything the Zealothi had ever encountered. It attacked their cellular structure at the genetic level, causing rapid organ failure and death within days of infection. "They're offering their entire quantum computing database," So-young read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "All their technological knowledge in exchange for biological expertise." Jin-woo leaned back in his chair, trying to process the magnitude of what they were reading. Zealothi quantum computing was legendary throughout the galaxy. Their processors could solve mathematical problems that would take Earth's computers centuries to complete. The knowledge contained in their databases would advance human technology by hundreds of years. "Look at this part," So-young said, pointing to a section of the translation. "They've already contacted the Galactic Council for help." Jin-woo pulled up the official Galactic Communications Network and searched for any mention of the Zealothi crisis. What he found made his stomach sink. The Galactic Council had indeed received the Zealothi plea for help, but their response had been swift and final. Status: unsolvable biological crisis. Recommendation: evacuation of surviving population to designated refugee worlds. No intervention authorized. The cold, clinical language of the Council's response stood in stark contrast to the desperate emotion in the Zealothi message. Jin-woo had seen this before. The galaxy's major powers were quick to write off smaller civilizations when helping them seemed too difficult or expensive. "The Council marked this as a lost cause yesterday," Jin-woo said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "They've written off the entire Zealothi civilization." So-young stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth in front of the workstation. Her scientific training had taught her to analyze problems methodically, to break down complex issues into manageable pieces. But this wasn't just a scientific challenge, it was a moral one. "Then we'll be the only ones foolish enough to answer," she said, her voice filled with determination. Jin-woo looked at her with surprise. Earth was still the newest member of the galactic community, barely 5 years since first contact. Most of the established civilizations still viewed humans as primitive newcomers who had little to offer beyond curiosity value. "So young we don't even know if we can help them," he said carefully. "This plague defeated their advanced medical technology. What makes you think we can succeed where they failed?" So Young smiled, but there was steel in her expression. "Because we're from Earth, Jinwoo. We evolved on a world that most galactic species consider uninhabitable. We've survived plagues, toxins, radiation, and conditions that would kill most other forms of life. Maybe what they call primitive is exactly what the Zealothi need." She was already moving toward the emergency communications array, her fingers flying over the control panels as she prepared to draft a response to the Zealothi transmission. "What are you doing?" Jinwoo asked, though he was already reaching for his own communication controls. "I'm telling them that help is coming," So Young replied. "And then I'm calling Admiral Kim. The research vessel Soul's Pride can be ready for emergency departure within 12 hours. Jinwoo felt a mix of excitement and terror as he watched So Young compose humanity's response to the desperate alien Plea. Earth's newest member of the galactic community was about to make its first real impression, and there would be no going back. Captain Kim Minho stood on the bridge of the research vessel Soul's Pride, watching through the main viewscreen as Zelios Prime slowly grew from a distant star to a visible world. The planet had once been beautiful, according to the records they had studied during their 3-week journey through hyperspace. Old images showed a world of brilliant blue oceans and silver continents, with floating cities that sparkled like jewels in the sunlight. Now, as they approached the dying world, Minho could see that everything had changed. The atmosphere that should have been clear blue was now a sickly yellow color, like infected pus. Thick clouds swirled across the surface, carrying the biological plague that was destroying everything it touched. Dr. Lee So-young stood behind the captain's chair, her tablet displaying streams of data from their long-range sensors. The information painted a grim picture of a world in its final days. Temperature readings showed massive climate shifts as the plague killed the plants that regulated the planet's weather. Ocean samples detected through their scanners revealed dead zones where nothing could survive. "The plague has been active for 6 months now," So-young said quietly, reading from her reports. "At first it only affected the Zealothi themselves. But now it's spreading to their plants, their animals, even the bacteria in their soil." Lieutenant Choi Do-eun worked at the communication station, her fingers moving quickly over the control panels as she tried to establish contact with any survivors on the planet's surface. Most of the major cities had gone silent weeks ago. Only a few scattered settlements still broadcast distress signals. "Captain, I'm detecting a transmission from the northern continent," Do-eun announced. "It's weak, but it's definitely Zealothi. They're trying to reach us." Minho nodded and moved to stand beside her station. "Put it through. Let's see who's left down there." The main view screen flickered and changed, showing the interior of what appeared to be a medical facility. Emergency lighting cast everything in red shadows, and Minho could see broken equipment scattered across the floor. In the center of the image stood a figure that made him catch his breath. Captain Velnara of the Zealothi looked nothing like the proud officer who had sent the original distress call. Her body was tall and thin, made of what looked like living crystal that normally glowed with soft blue light. But now her crystalline skin was dull and cracked, with dark veins running through it like poison. Her large eyes, which should have sparkled like diamonds, were clouded with exhaustion and pain. "Humans," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You actually came." So-young stepped forward, placing herself where Velnara could see her clearly. "We received your message, Captain. Earth has sent its best medical team to help." Velnara's head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed confused. "The Galactic Council reviewed our case 3 days ago. They told us that your species originated from a Class 12 death world. We thought that was an error in their translation software." Minho had heard this reaction before during Earth's early days in the galactic community. Most alien species found it hard to believe that intelligent life could evolve on a world as dangerous as Earth. The galactic classification system rated planets based on how hostile they were to life. Class 1 worlds were paradise planets with perfect temperatures and no dangerous weather. Class 12 worlds were considered uninhabitable death traps. "Earth is our home, Captain Velnara," So-young replied calmly. "We've learned to thrive in conditions that most species consider impossible." Behind them, Dr. Park Hyun-soo looked up from his workstation where he had been analyzing the plague data. The microbiologist was young for such an important mission, but he had already made groundbreaking discoveries about alien diseases during his 5 years at the Seoul Institute of Xenobiology. "Captain Velnara, can you tell us more about this plague?" Hyunsu asked. Our preliminary scans show that it's not a natural virus. Velnara's crystalline features grew even dimmer. The Korthak Empire created it specifically to destroy us. They spent decades studying our biology, learning our weaknesses. This plague was engineered to exploit the biological systems common to all known sentient life forms. She paused, her breathing becoming more labored. Every species in this sector of the galaxy shares similar cellular structures, similar immune responses. The Korthak designed their weapon to attack those shared features. That's why no one can help us. That's why the Council declared our situation hopeless. So Young exchanged a look with Hyunsu. They had suspected something like this from the medical data they had reviewed during their journey. The plague was too perfect, too specifically targeted to be natural. But this plague was designed based on galactic biological standards, Hyunsu said, his voice growing excited. It assumes that all intelligent life follows the same evolutionary patterns. Velnara looked confused. Of course. All sentient species evolved from similar environmental pressures. All intelligent life shares common biological foundations. This is basic science. Not on Earth, So Young said with a small smile. We evolved on a world where deadly diseases, poisonous plants, and toxic chemicals were part of daily life for millions of years. Our immune systems don't follow the galactic standard because they were never meant to. Dr. Park Hyun-soo leaned forward eagerly. Captain Velnara, we've been fighting biological warfare since before we discovered fire. Every human carries an immune system designed to handle threats that would kill most galactic species. We've evolved alongside countless pathogens, toxins, and biological weapons that our own planet threw at us. Minho watched as understanding slowly dawned in the alien captain's clouded eyes. The same evolutionary pressures that made Earth a Class 12 death world had also created humans who could potentially survive what was killing the Zealothi. That's exactly why we might succeed where others have failed, Hyun-soo continued. What the Korthak see as perfect biological warfare, we see as just another disease to fight. As their shuttle prepared to descend through Zelios Prime's poisoned atmosphere, Minho looked around at his crew. Lieutenant Choi Do-eun was calmly running final systems checks. Dr. So-young was organizing her medical equipment with steady hands. Dr. Park Hyun-soo was practically vibrating with scientific excitement. What terrified most of the galaxy felt like just another challenging mission to humans who had learned to call Earth home. Dr. Park Hyun-soo adjusted the electron microscope one more time, his eyes focused on the tiny killer floating in the sample dish. The Korthak virus was unlike anything he had seen before. Under maximum magnification, it looked like a perfect geometric sculpture made of crystalline spikes and metallic surfaces. Every angle was precise, every surface smooth and calculated. It's beautiful in a terrifying way, he whispered to himself. Beside him, the Zealothi scientist Morthel shifted nervously in his environmental suit. The alien's crystalline body was still showing dark veins from the plague infection, but the emergency medical treatments Dr. Lee So-young had given him were keeping him alive for now. Dr. Hyun-soo, I must warn you again, Morthel said through his suit's communication system. That sample has killed 17 researchers from 6 different species. Even looking at it through protective barriers has caused infections in some cases. Hyun-soo nodded but continued his examination. He had been studying the virus for 3 days now, taking detailed images and running chemical analyses. What he was discovering made him both excited and deeply worried. This virus is not just deadly, he said, pointing to the microscope's display screen. It's absolutely perfect. Look at these protein structures. They're designed to attach to specific cellular receptors that exist in almost every known form of intelligent life. Morthel leaned closer to look at the display. Yes, the Korthak spent decades studying our biology and the biology of our galactic neighbors. They identified the common features that all sentient species share. That's exactly what makes this so fascinating, Hyun-soo continued. The virus targets cellular structures that most galactic species share, but humans evolved completely differently. Our cells don't have these standard receptors because we never needed them. On the other side of the laboratory, Dr. Lee So-young was running tests on samples of human blood, saliva, and other biological materials. She had been working for nearly 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. Morthel, come look at this, she called out, gesturing to her workstation. I've been analyzing human gut bacteria, and the results are incredible. The Zealothi scientist moved carefully across the lab, still amazed that humans could work so casually around materials that would kill him within minutes. So-young's workstation was covered with sample dishes, chemical analyzers, and data displays showing complex biological charts. Your biology is completely different from anything we've seen, Morthel said, studying the human bacterial samples. Your gut bacteria alone contains compounds we've never encountered in any known species. So-young smiled and pulled up a comparison chart on her main display. Look at this. The average human carries about 40 trillion bacterial cells in their digestive system. These bacteria help us break down food, produce vitamins, and fight off harmful substances. But more importantly, Hyunsu added, walking over to join them, these bacteria produce compounds that are toxic to the Korthak virus. It's like we carry our own biological weapons factory. Morthel's large eyes widened in amazement. You mean your normal digestive process creates chemicals that can destroy the plague? It's not just different, So-young explained. Human biology is adapted to constant biological warfare. Every human carries trillions of microorganisms that help us process toxins and fight infections that would kill most other species. She pulled up another chart showing Earth's biological history. For millions of years, our ancestors lived alongside deadly diseases, poisonous plants, and toxic chemicals. We evolved to not just survive these threats, but to use them to make ourselves stronger. Meanwhile, 3 levels above the laboratory, Captain Kim Min-ho stood in the Seoul's Pride Command Center studying tactical displays with Commander Yu Tae-min. The Korthak fleet had been detected at the edge of the solar system 2 hours earlier, moving faster than their intelligence reports had predicted. The enemy fleet is advancing ahead of schedule, Tae-min reported, his voice tense. Long-range sensors show 12 battle cruisers and at least 30 smaller attack ships. They expect to find a dead world with no resistance. Min-ho studied the enemy formation on the main tactical screen. The Korthak ships moved in perfect geometric patterns, their approach calculated and methodical. Everything about their strategy suggested they expected an easy victory. Instead, they'll find humans who consider their impossible conditions normal, Min-ho replied grimly. Have our marine units ready for boarding operations. Tae-min nodded and activated his communication system. Sergeant Kang Ji-hai, report to the command center for tactical briefing. Within minutes, Sergeant Kang Ji-hai arrived with her squad leaders. The Marine sergeant was a small woman, but her reputation for fighting in impossible conditions was legendary throughout the Earth Defense Forces. Captain, my teams have been training for zero-gravity boarding actions during the entire journey here, she reported. We've studied Korthak ship designs and identified weak points in their hull structures. Min-ho brought up detailed schematics of Korthak vessels on the tactical display. The enemy uses energy shields that can deflect most projectile weapons, but their ships aren't designed for close-quarters combat. They've never faced boarding parties. Most galactic species can't survive the conditions inside a damaged spacecraft, Tae-min added. Vacuum exposure, radiation, extreme temperatures, these things kill other species quickly. Kang Ji-hai smiled confidently. But we trained on Luna Base and the asteroid mining stations. Vacuum operations are routine for human marines. Back in the laboratory, So-young's team was making breakthrough discoveries every hour. She had successfully isolated the bacterial compounds that could neutralize the Korthak virus. Now she was working with Zelothi quantum stabilization technology to create a cure that could be mass-produced. The quantum stabilizers will allow us to preserve the bacterial compounds in a form that Zelothi biology can accept, she explained to Hyunsu and Morthel. We're essentially creating a medicine that uses human gut bacteria as the active ingredient. Morthel watched in wonder as the humans worked with materials and concepts that violated everything he knew about galactic biology. Your species approaches problems completely differently from everyone else in the galaxy. That's because we learned to survive on a world that tried to kill us every single day, Hyunsu replied. What other species see as impossible challenges, we see as normal problems with creative solutions. As the Korthak fleet drew closer to Zelios Prime, both the medical team and the military forces prepared for battles the enemy never expected to fight. The Korthak had designed their plague to exploit the weaknesses shared by all known intelligent life, but they had never encountered a species that evolved by turning disadvantages into strengths. The Korthak battle cruiser destroyer's edge materialized from hyperspace like a dark mountain appearing in empty space. Admiral Korthvar stood on his command bridge, watching through the main viewer as Zelios Prime grew larger before them. The planet looked exactly as he had expected, a dying world wrapped in yellow clouds of plague, with no signs of resistance or organized defense. Fleet status report, Korthvar commanded, his 4 arms moving across different control panels simultaneously. All 12 battle cruisers ready for planetary occupation, his tactical officer replied. 30 attack ships in formation. No significant military presence detected. Korthvar nodded with satisfaction. The Zealoty had been a minor annoyance for centuries, always interfering with Korthak expansion plans with their peaceful negotiations and diplomatic solutions. Now, with their population reduced to less than 20%, claiming their advanced technology would be simple. Wait, the communications officer called out suddenly. Admiral, I'm detecting unknown vessels in the outer system. They appear to be approaching us. The main viewer shifted to show a group of ships that made Korthvar pause. The largest vessel was clearly alien in design, with smooth curves and strange markings on its hull. Around it flew several smaller craft that looked primitive compared to Korthak military technology. Identify those ships, Korthvar ordered. Unknown configuration, Admiral. But I'm receiving a transmission from the lead vessel. The communication system crackled to life, and a voice spoke in heavily accented Galactic Standard. This is Captain Kim Minho of the Earth vessel Soul's Pride. You are not welcome in this system. Korthvar felt his mouth stretch into what other species would recognize as a cruel smile. Earth, he had heard of this new species that claimed to come from a Class 12 death world. Most galactic military analysts considered them a curiosity, a primitive people who had somehow achieved space travel despite their backwards planet. Deathworlders, Korthvar laughed, his voice echoing through his bridge. Your primitive species cannot comprehend Korthak's superiority. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The human response was immediate and completely unexpected. Instead of retreating or trying to negotiate, the human ships suddenly accelerated directly toward the Korthak fleet. But they didn't follow any logical attack pattern. The main vessel dove straight down toward a field of space debris left over from an old asteroid mining operation. The smaller ships scattered in different directions, some heading toward Zelios Prime's moons, others racing toward the system's outer planets. Admiral, their movements make no tactical sense, the tactical officer reported, confusion clear in his voice. They're flying through hazardous regions that should destroy their ships. Korthvar watched in amazement as the human vessels navigated through the debris field at speeds that should have been impossible. Chunks of metal and rock that would have crushed normal spacecraft bounced harmlessly off their hulls or were dodged with precision that defied explanation. How are they surviving those conditions? He muttered. The answer came when the smaller human ships began using the gravitational pull of planets and moons to increase their speed. They whipped around celestial bodies in tight orbits that generated forces strong enough to crush most living beings, but the human ships emerged from each maneuver moving even faster. Admiral, 3 human vessels are approaching from Vector 7, his weapons officer called out. They're requesting permission to dock. Impossible, Korthvar snarled. No ship can dock with a vessel during combat. Activate defensive shields and prepare to repel boarders. But the humans didn't dock in any conventional sense. Instead, their small ships rammed directly into the destroyer's edge hull, their reinforced fronts punching holes through the armored exterior. Emergency alarms began screaming throughout the Korthak ship as atmosphere rushed out through the breaches. What happened next defied everything Korthvar knew about space combat. Human soldiers poured through the hull breaches, but they weren't wearing the heavy environmental suits that any sane species would need in the vacuum of space. Instead, they wore lightweight armor that seemed to provide minimal protection against the deadly conditions inside a damaged warship. Sergeant Kang Ji-hai led the first wave of Marines through the largest breach in the destroyer's edge hull. The Korthak had sealed off the damaged sections and filled them with poisonous gases meant to kill any boarding party, but the human soldiers moved through the toxic environment as if it were normal air. Korthak defensive positions identified, Kang Ji-hai reported through her communication system. Enemy forces wearing full environmental suits. They're moving slowly due to equipment limitations. The Korthak Marines were indeed struggling. Their environmental suits were designed for short-term emergency use, not extended combat operations. The bulky equipment made them clumsy and slow, while the humans moved with deadly efficiency through conditions that should have killed them within minutes. On the planet's surface, Dr. Lee So-young watched the orbital battle through her portable scanner while continuing to distribute the cure to Zealoty survivors. The underground medical facility where she worked buzzed with activity as recovered Zealoty helped her team reach more infected populations. The quantum-stabilized probiotic compound is working exactly as predicted, she reported to Dr. Park Hyun-soo, who was coordinating cure distribution from the Soul's Pride. Infection rates are dropping by 60% per hour in treated areas. Morthel, the Zealoty scientist who had been helping them, stood nearby watching the human medical team work. Your cure is saving thousands of lives every hour, he said, his voice filled with wonder. But how are your ships fighting so effectively against Korthak military technology? So-young looked up from her work and smiled. Because we're used to impossible conditions. What the Korthak see as deadly hazards, we see as normal challenges. Above them, the space battle continued to defy all conventional military wisdom. Lieutenant Choi Doon's fighter squadron executed maneuvers that violated every known principle of safe space combat. They flew directly through energy weapon fire that would have vaporized normal ships, using the heat and radiation as cover for their attacks. The Korthak pilots, trained for precise, calculated warfare, couldn't adapt to enemies who seemed to ignore basic survival instincts. Their formation broke apart as human fighters appeared from impossible angles, striking weak points in their ships before disappearing again into hazardous regions of space. Admiral Korthvar's final transmission to his fleet command was filled with confusion and disbelief. This is impossible. Their biology should have failed, their tactics should have crumbled. How can they survive conditions that kill our best warriors? Captain Kim Min-ho's response came through clearly over the communication system, calm and steady despite the chaos of battle around him. You've never fought someone from a death world before. 6 months had passed since the battle that changed everything, and Dr. Lee So-young still felt amazed every time she walked through the halls of the Interspecies Biological Research Institute. The building stood where a Zealothi medical facility had once been overwhelmed by plague victims. Now it buzzed with the sounds of scientific discovery and hope. She paused outside Classroom 7, where young Zealothi students were learning about Earth's extreme environments. Through the transparent wall, she could see their teacher displaying holographic images of Earth's most dangerous places: active volcanoes, deep ocean trenches, radioactive zones, and Arctic wastelands. The humans call this place the Sahara Desert, the teacher explained to her class. Temperatures reach over 50 degrees Celsius during the day, then drop below freezing at night. Most galactic species would die within hours, but humans have lived there for thousands of years. One of the young students raised her crystalline hand. Teacher, why did humans choose to live in such terrible places? They didn't choose it, the teacher replied. These conditions shaped them. Every dangerous environment on Earth taught humans to adapt and survive. What we see as impossible challenges, they see as normal problems to solve. So-young smiled as she listened. The young Zealothi were beginning to understand something that had taken the rest of the galaxy much longer to grasp. They're beginning to understand, came a familiar voice behind her. So-young turned to see Captain Velnara approaching down the hallway. The Zealothi officer looked completely different from the dying figure they had first encountered 6 months ago. Her crystalline body now glowed with healthy blue light, and the dark veins of plague infection had completely disappeared. What makes humans dangerous also makes them invaluable, Velnara continued, joining So-young at the classroom window. The transformation of Velnara and her people had been remarkable to witness. Within weeks of receiving the human-developed cure, Zealothi cities began coming back to life. Their floating platforms rose again above the crystal lakes, powered by fusion reactors that hummed with renewed energy. Art, music, and literature began flowing from their civilization once more. But the changes went deeper than just physical recovery. The Zealothi had learned to see the galaxy differently, to value qualities they had never considered important before. Dr. So-young, there you are, called Captain Kim Min-ho as he walked down the hallway with Commander Yu Tae-min. Both men wore new insignia on their uniforms, the symbol of the Terran Zealothi Defense Alliance, showing Earth and Zelios Prime orbiting each other in a protective embrace. The Galactic Council has finally processed Earth's membership application, Min-ho announced, his voice filled with satisfaction. Apparently, solving the impossible Zealothi crisis impressed them enough to fast-track our status. So-young laughed. It only took them 6 months to decide that saving an entire civilization was worth noticing. The path to full galactic membership had been complicated. Earth's initial application had been delayed for years while various councils and committees debated whether humans were ready for full participation in galactic society. Most established species viewed Earth as too primitive, too aggressive, too unpredictable. But everything changed after the Zealothi crisis. Word had spread quickly throughout the galaxy about the species from the Class 12 Death World that had accomplished what everyone else considered impossible. Dr. Park Hyun-soo approached their group, carrying a data pad that seemed to grow heavier with messages every day. Everyone wants to understand human biology now, he said, showing them the long list of requests on his screen. I've got collaboration offers from the Alterian Medical Institute, the Centauri Research Collective, and 3 different military organizations. What are they asking for? Velnara inquired, her curiosity evident. They're realizing that our primitive symbiotic relationships might hold keys to problems they never imagined solving, Hyun-soo explained. The Vegan Council wants to know how human gut bacteria can neutralize toxins. The Rigel Defense Force is interested in how we survive in vacuum conditions. The Andromedan Science Academy wants to study our immune systems. Through the Institute's large viewing windows, they could see another Earth vessel approaching Zelios Prime. The diplomatic ship Busan's Dream carried the second wave of human scientists, doctors, and advisors who would help establish permanent research partnerships throughout this sector of the galaxy. Look at that, Minho said, pointing to the approaching ship. 2 years ago, Earth had never sent a vessel beyond our own solar system. Now we're establishing research institutes on alien worlds. The changes had been dramatic for both species. Zealothy quantum computing technology was revolutionizing human science, while human biological expertise was solving problems that had puzzled galactic civilization for centuries. But the partnership went beyond just sharing technology. We didn't conquer our way into the galactic community, So Young reflected, watching the Earth ship dock with the orbital platform. We saved our way in. The approach was uniquely human. Most species joined galactic society through trade agreements, military alliances, or technological exchanges. But Earth had announced itself by responding to a desperate plea for help from a dying civilization, offering aid when everyone else had given up. Velnara's translation device produced what sounded like gentle laughter. You humans have taught us something important about strength. The galaxy's greatest power isn't its most advanced species or its largest military forces. She gestured toward the classroom where young Zealothy students were now studying images of Earth's coral reefs, marveling at ecosystems that thrived in conditions their own species would find hostile. The galaxy's real strength is the species that learn to thrive where others would simply die, Velnara continued. You've shown us that survival isn't about avoiding challenges, it's about turning those challenges into advantages. As the twin suns of Zelios Prime began to set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of gold and purple, So Young looked out at the world they had helped save. The planet's atmosphere was clear blue again, free from the yellow taint of plague. Cities floated peacefully above crystal lakes, their lights reflecting like stars on the water's surface. 6 months ago this world had been dying. The galactic community had written off the Zealothy as a lost cause, their civilization doomed to extinction. But now children played in the floating gardens, artists created new works celebrating the partnership between species, and scientists from both worlds worked together to solve problems that had seemed impossible. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy not as conquerors seeking territory or resources, but as healers who saw challenges where others saw only death. They had become what So Young privately thought of as the galaxy's immune system, a species evolved to fight the impossible battles and find solutions in the darkest circumstances. And this, she realized, was only the beginning of what they could accomplish together.